We've invited Barby Ulmer tonight to give a personal perspective of peace building. And to do that, we have gone into the archives, and thanks to Barby's various community that helped us do this, we've come up with an audio recording of Barby and Vic on KPF radio. And, you know, we have Rowan, our tech maven, who is just wonderful at this. And I think George contributed the photo, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're going to listen to a very short part of this interview. It was much longer than the part we've got, but Rowan has selected a great portion of it. And then we're going to have a question and answer. So think of your questions of Barby and her peace building from a personal perspective.
You tune to listener-sponsored KPFA and KPFB in Berkeley, KFCF in Fresno at 6:30, and it's time now for African Press Review with Walter Turner.
My name is Walter Turner. I'm your regular host of Africa Press Review, and it gives me great pleasure today to be seated with Barby and Vic Ulmer, who are the organizers, the coordinators, the developers of Our Developing World. So it's good you could make it today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Walter.
The Our Developing World, why did you do this? Why did you come up with that title?
Oh, it's a long story, but what it premised on is that we were down in Central America observing some development work that one of my former students was engaged in the highlands of Guatemala. And this was an empowerment project which we saw people's lives transformed year after year by efforts of their own, basically. We tried to relate this to people when we got back home here, and nobody had a handle on what we were talking about. So we said, hey, part of it is just ignorance on our part of the rest of the world and what's going on in terms of dynamic change. And we've got to do something on our own to make it possible for people to understand. So we started developing materials and presentations and study tours to these areas to have people come directly in contact with these fantastic people and the projects that they are underway with.
What year was this?
Oh, 70 is when we first went down to Guatemala.
So what's the scope of Our Developing World now? What do you do? What do you attempt to do?
Well, we're designed to bring realities of the developing countries and the richness of multicultures to North Americans through programs, through teacher workshops, a lending resource library for teachers. Unfortunately, we don't mail, so it's just for the teachers in Santa Clara Valley who can come and pick up and deliver. We do study tours. We do material aid with those study tours, and we have developed 3 teaching kits, one on Southern Africa, one on South Africa, and one on Central America, with hands-on stuff. The table of contents is geared to the California History Social Science Framework. There are lots of source materials in the form of stories and books and reference materials, and of course all the hands-on stuff, posters, music, a slide presentation with print and tape narration, and a set of slides for the kids to make their own culminating slide presentation at the end of whatever the teacher wants to do with the unit. So these are kits for schools or districts to buy.
So you've been going to Southern Africa, but there's other places you've been also going to.
Well, we started out leading study tours to China. Then we focused on, well, actually, then we had a sabbatical year in Africa. We led a study tour to Tanzania. Then in '82 we started leading our Central American tours, and in '84 and '86 and '90 we led Zimbabwe, Mozambique study tours, and this summer we're going to lead one to South Africa for the first time. Third time we've been there, but the first time it's been appropriate to take a group.
How do you make sure that your tours are more than the kind of click tourist events where people go and take pictures and say, I met the people and come home. I mean, what do you do to, I guess, push the tours as much as possible towards goals and concerns that you've had since you started Our Developing World?
I think the focus is basically on people and development, and so it's getting in contact with people who are engaged out on the grassroots level and all kinds of exciting projects, be they in healthcare, education, housing, whatever that might be. But
women's self-help projects,
right,
often in either training to be child care providers and having them right in their own homes with marvelous training and the same curriculum that you'd find in any preschool. Or it could be a sewing project where they've learned to sew and now they're designing and they're looking for markets. I mean, it's easy to organize that kind of tour because that's the only thing we're interested in.
But how do you get the people who come back, who participate, to make it more than a visit?
Well, you know, we don't require that people promise to do something when they get back. But we ask them in their applications how they think they're going to use it so that they start thinking about it. And we ask them to talk with their colleagues and family and neighbors and friends and see if they can get donations of sewing and school and medical supplies and clothing to take with them in their 66 pounds of free baggage and just use their carry-on for their own needs. And that way, you see, they'll have a ready audience when they get back, and we suggest that. And then the experience itself is so moving that people come back and they want to share. And we've had spin-offs in a wide variety of ways. One woman started importing baskets from the Women's Bureau in Zimbabwe, where we had the opportunity to visit a number of rural projects, and she has been holding basket sales in her home for several years and talking about the people and the conditions and through those baskets. Other people have changed their majors and gone into environmental studies or third world studies or decided to become teachers so that they could share this kind of thing. There are just all kinds of spin-offs that happen.
For those of you who are listening, I'm speaking with Barby and Vic Ulmer, who are with Our Developing World.
It's time for it's time for questions. What questions, and Rowan, I'm going to ask for your help on this because I can't see everybody. So if you have a question for Barby from this, and if there isn't one, I have one to start off. So Barby, what motivated you and Vic back in when you started? What was the motivation?
Well, we've always felt that travel was about people. So that was the motivation, to get to know people in various parts of the world, to find out what their wishes, what their hopes, what their emphasis is in their lives, how they work with people.
And do you mind if I interrupt now and then, just to interject some little? So Mom, I remember, we would travel every summer as a family. You took us all over the place. We went to Europe and South America and Central America, and some of it was around your WIL women's conferences, where they were held in different parts of the world. But I remember that you were a little bit, I don't know, uninspired as sort of traveling as, well, you never traveled as typical tourists, I have to say, but to go to Western Europe, for example, there wasn't as much to learn or mine. And when you went to Guatemala, when we went to Guatemala and you saw the development work there, and you saw, it's just as Dad kind of described in that recording, you saw people empowered for reasons that were very practical. These farmers were learning enlightened techniques and really actually getting back to Mayan techniques, using a lot of the same organic practices that the Mayans had actually developed, but there'd been a big movement away from. And when you saw that empowerment take place, you know what, I'm being redundant, I'm sorry, Dad said it, but you really wanted to bring this experience to other North Americans. And so then through your contacts in Central America, you began to develop similar contacts in other parts of the world where you'd bring people. So I just remember that that Guatemala experience was really pivotal in you deciding to found our developing world.
I have a comment, Judy. We think of the the typical traveler who wants to get the best hotel, the best food, only goes to the European museums to see the masters, the ugly Americans who ask for better booze when they're in India and being given a native brew or something. And obviously what you did was to dispel in everything you did the ugly American syndrome of a traveler who doesn't really get it, that it's not just bringing culture, your own culture forward, but discovering what needs to be done to help other people come to a prosperous and healthful life. So I applaud what you did. I've never traveled, but when I was in college, I was part of, you wrote letters to a child in a different country. And I've done that ever since I was a freshman. I have a little girl now in Guatemala that I write to. But I haven't done broad travel outside of my own little boxes, I guess. So thank you for what you've done.
Barbie, whenever you want to respond or comment or whatever, we love to hear you. I did have something. Go ahead. Yeah.
I will if there's something important to say, but I'm really here to listen.
Oh, okay. Well, one of the things I remember, not having gone on any of your trips, is that you brought back wonderful things that were made in the places where you had visited. And you had sales yourself, and you also had tables, not just one table, but maybe 2.5 tables at the Holiday Peace Fair to sell things that some of them would be classified as crafts, and some of them were practical items or whatever, but handmade usually. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that aspect of it? And then Lillian has her hand up.
Well, thank you for remembering that. The crafts that we brought back were our way of helping people be on our trip who couldn't be on the trip. And we always had stories to tell about them and about the people who made them and how they were used there, because these were not things that were made for travelers to buy. They were everyday things that people used. So there was a story about every single one of them. And it's these stories that we wanted to share. And we could do it by bringing back some of the crafts so that we could tell the stories about them.
Nifty.
And I see Lillian's hand.
Yes, I think three things caught my attention. One, you mentioned something about teachers and bringing that information to teachers. Number two, you traveled, but your daughter, who's speaking now, said that she didn't travel as much. So that caught me by off guard. But the third thing that was really interesting was I think you and your husband caught on to something that is now very popular, is the micro loan for young women and women that need to provide them their families with an income, such as in Africa, and small businesses. So you were ahead of your time. Those are the three things that I caught. Thank you.
Thank you so much for mentioning those things.
So Barbie, do you still have some of those things around your living situation?
If you visit me at home, you'll see the world right there. And I can tell you where the things came from and how they were used and the people that we brought them from.
So how about continuing contact? Do you still have contact with some of the people that you encountered in your visits or that went on your trips with you?
Oh, yes, both. We try to stay in touch with the people that we visited overseas. And we have times when we get together with people who have traveled with us to learn how they've been using what they saw and what they learned so that we can build even better tours.
And I'm going to interject again too. One of the people, two of the people that Mom and Dad met during their South African trips were the Malotsi's, who were exiled from South Africa, and you met them, I think, in Zambia. Hugh and his parents, Priska. So anyway, Priska had a son, Hugh, and he ended up coming to the University of Santa Clara, and he became one of our, he would be with us during Thanksgiving and so on. And he since has settled in Cupertino and is raising two now young women with his wife, Michelle, and they're still very significant in Mom's life. And I also think of Zenaida. I mean, to me, many of you might know Zenaida, but Mom and Dad took one of our developing trips was to Honduras and Guatemala, and Zenaida was, her life was threatened because she was questioning her brother's disappearance. This is in Honduras, and Mom and Dad insisted, well, this is a long story made short. They insisted that their flight out of Honduras back to the United States, they would not let it leave the tarmac unless Zenaida was on that plane. And Zenaida had 24 hours notice. She very nearly did not make it on that flight because the authorities got wind of it. But she ended up on that flight. She didn't speak any English at all. She didn't have time to say goodbye to her nearest and dearest. And she started living in the San Jose area. And Mom and Dad would hold fundraisers for her so that she had a means to survive as she was scrambling to start a new life. So she's very much in Mom's life too. there's a long list of people like that. Also Joseph Muti, who facilitated all the trips to Cuba. And Mom, how many trips did you lead to Cuba?
Oh, Karen, I can't remember.
At least half a dozen. And so Joseph is central to Mom and Dad's life too. And and Joseph can be contacted.
So Barbie, you've done all of this with Our Developing World, and there were other aspects of your peace building besides Our Developing World, which we've heard about. Music was always a part of your peace building, was it not?
Well, that's how Vic and I met. And it made such a difference to have a partner who loved to sing and loved to travel. He was the greatest. I miss him so much.
And you sang in the Peace Chorale for many, many, many years, the Peace Chorale, right?
Right.
And you sing with the grannies every chance you get when it's easy. And when we show up where you are.
Yeah.
We got to show up where you are. There was also some trips that involved more active kind of peace building. I'm thinking of your South Africa trip where you were election monitors.
Oh, yes. That was the first free election that they had in South Africa. And we offered to be peace monitors at the elections. And that was, I'll just never forget that. When we got the go-ahead, when we were there, that we could do that, I mentioned it to a South African friend I was having lunch with, and she was just thrilled that we would come and help in their election. It was the first time she'd met anybody from another country who was willing to do something there to help them. And of course, that's the world we live in. So I was just delighted to be able to tell her that we were going to be back and help with that election. And we've remained friends all these years.
And what year?
Paula, I want to just say something about the name Our Developing World. And you just brought it up again, Barbie, that the concept of our world, all of us, you and Vic and the people you were meeting with and getting acquainted with and doing things and learning from and so on and so forth. I just think the name of it is really very, very special, very important.
Oh, we feel it's our world, the whole world. Mm-hmm. And we have to develop together or we're not going to be developing. So that's how the name came.
And I will never forget when you returned from that trip. And frankly, my brother and I were nervous about Mom and Dad going to monitor the elections because we were reading a lot of reports about violence in certain regions of South Africa, and Mom and Dad were both stationed apart from each other in different regions. And it became clear that yes, there was a risk that something could happen to them, but this is exactly where their hearts were. This is exactly what you wanted to be doing. And so be it. The risk, it was worth the risk. And it's you've been that way always. You've been fearless, and you've said you've sort of not been You haven't had that consciousness about this being something to be fearful about. And then when you returned from that, and I came to pick you up from the airport, the Peace Corral was there to meet you, coming through the terminal. And this is before TSA and everything like that. So they came, they were singing freedom is coming, oh freedom is coming, oh freedom, or I butchering it, but it was incredibly moving because everybody stopped. This is an airport where people are always moving, and it was just a very profound moment greeting you back from that experience.
Oh, that was so wonderful. I'll never forget that.
And I see a hand. I see
Lisa, who
Lisa.
doesn't know how to do, and I'm already crying because I'm so emotional. I went with Barbie and Vic in 86 or 87 to Honduras and Nicaragua. It was the first time we met Zenaida. She didn't come until the following year. You brought her back. But that was really scary for me because there were in Honduras, every street had armed guards. And that was the first time I was in a third world country. And, but it was an amazing experience. And, Barbie and Vic, in terms of the people we met, you meet everybody, women's group, health advocates, peace people, sometimes professors. It was just an absolutely amazing trip. And I know that they are still in touch with many more people. Barbie's still in touch with many more people. And also, Joan was talking about the Peace Fair, but they also had an annual around Thanksgiving time crafts sale at their house. And I have many of their things, too many. I don't buy anything anymore. But I did get a ballot from that I think it was 1992 South African election. One of the things that they had was a list of all of the candidates from that experience. So lots of, and I have a little card, just knickknacks that represent all sorts of what they brought. But thank you, Barbie.
Thank you, Lisa.
That when you were talking about the name Developing World, I realized that when we say third world or something like that, we mean a place of lesser something that needs to be brought into something bigger. But it's often pejorative. Instead,
Right.
I'm hearing that we are all in one world and we're developing the oneness of it, which means we respect the other cultures as important as being Americans, and the family relationships being special, the customs being special. It gives the view of an expanding community. And that's very powerful thought for me, and I'm crying a little bit.
And thank you, Judy, for correcting my term that I shouldn't have used. I will try. I usually don't, but I'm just so emotional that
What term? Developing world?
No, when I said third world, and so you're right. It was my first time out of North America.
Oh, well, that wasn't a problem
No,
to me.
I know, but I appreciate that because it's a point that's so important, especially with all the wars and everything that's happening in our world today.
Yeah,
we're all human.
We're all in one
We're all
world.
one people, and we actually have the resources to make it so that everybody has a house and food and can live in peace and have a good life. It's just we choose not to pay enough attention.
Right on.
Well, and one of the things that, Mom, you would often say, we can learn so much from these other countries. It's like all the answers aren't here. And so when this last time we went with you to Guatemala, 2018, and we went to the Mayan mediation organization, and they're all about restorative justice. And of course, now we see that in police departments all over our country, but just looking to see how these community leaders reconciled sensitive and difficult issues was something that the people on that trip took home with them as a model for something that could be done in an improved way in our country.
So, Barbie, you weren't just active in these trips with our developing world and with the Peace Corral. In the blurb I sent out, I mentioned that you were part of the founding of the San Jose Peace and Justice Center.
It just happened. We needed a place to have meetings, and we found the Peace Center, and we thought this would be a good place, and it evolved. That's the way things happen.
And this is a WILPF meeting tonight, our regular third Friday WILPF meeting. You were also involved early in the San Jose WILPF chapter, if I recall.
Oh, yes. As soon as we moved to San Jose, I heard about WILPF, and I went to a meeting, and unfortunately, I don't think there's anybody alive besides me who remembers some of those wonderful women. But Florence Bird was an inspiration to me, and we just carried on her work.
And I heard a rumor you were president.
Oh, yeah, I was the youngest one in the group, so obviously I was made president. I knew exactly why. I was not fooled at all. When your hair gets white, you want to have something to look back on. You're doing things that you can remember and feel good about.
The Peace Center building, how did that come about? Because it has a plaque, that tells the name of the man who owned it. And was he involved with the Peace Center, or just happened to be the one who owned the building? Or do you remember about him or other people who were involved very early on, like you said?
I wasn't here at that time, but I think that the building is named after Shorty Collins. And I don't think he was the owner, but maybe Barbie can talk a little bit about him. He was instrumental in the building and in activism. Do you remember Shorty or Barbie?
He was at least 6'2", if not 6'3".
Yeah.
So that's how he got his name, Shorty. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful person to work with. And he made a lot of things happen. And the Peace Center was one of them.
Wonderful.
Well, you started out in a basement, then you moved to a storefront, then you went to another floor and some
on the 4th floor somewhere.
Yeah.
That was just not accessible. We realized we had to be on the street level. And we were fortunate enough to find the Peace Center, which made a big difference because we could be where people could just walk in, and we could have a sign in the window and welcoming people to walk in. So that's how it happened.
And didn't Pete Seeger,
Yes.
he sang for to raise money for the Peace Center too.
Right,
And
right.
he stayed at your house, at our house. Yes.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
right.
I think he did 2 concerts for the Peace Center.
Uh-huh.
I was at least one.
Oh, what a rich history. So you say, are we doing something so that when we get white hair, we can look back and say, I did something? I think you can do that, Barbie.
I think I have.
Yes.
And she's continuing to do. So the location of the Peace Center, right so close, half a block from the San Jose State University campus, is something that I think hopefully after COVID will hopefully inspire us to do even more. I know there's some activities that take place on campus by Peace Center people, so that's good. But
Yeah, we constantly have to do more. You're absolutely right.
What more should we be doing?
Well, we should have somebody from the college who is letting us know what's going to happen and how we can be part of it, so we can broaden our reach. That's one thing.
And the Peace Center has had interns from San Jose State that have done a significant part of the work. I'm not exactly sure right now. They are starting meetings now and having other activities, but I definitely have met some interns, which strengthens the relationship between the Peace Center and the campus.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
Well, and you haven't given up on peace. I hear you still go to Friday night
Yep.
vigils.
Yes, she does.
You know, my feeling about life is it's about showing up. So I show up.
And I think we all need to contact Biden and say, ceasefire now
Oh,
and no more weapons to Israel.
Or anywhere else either,
Yeah.
but especially Israel. I did go to the corner today, so we had a few more people than usual.
thank you.
Yeah. Barbie didn't make it. She was in training.
I knew why, for sure, but Charlotte had a big code pink ceasefire, and I made my own ceasefire and no money for war sign, and there was a family of 3 that were new for the first time, and we got a lot of honks. So that's a little bit encouraging. It's not stopping anything, but
I do think that that's one of the most important things of WILPF, is that it's about peace. You know, I'm from the 60s, peace and love and that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's not a single person out there that wants to see any child or woman or innocent person hurt in any way at all. But I do believe that Barb, her foundation and her willingness to stick her neck out, because from what I hear, you've been to pretty close calls in your life. I mean, you took a risk that I don't think most people would take. So you know, I do appreciate listening to this conversation tonight, and that you're still around and showing up is so important, and I thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I'm grateful to be able to be here and talk with you.
Other comments or anything for Barbie?
I just thought of something else that's worth noting, that your activity with the Quakers and with legislation has also been a big driver for you.
Are you still active in doing with Friends, the American Friends and Quakers?
Well, I don't go to their meetings, but I carry out what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think these days there's clicktivism. So if you're on a computer and you're on the American Friends service, you can click and respond and get things
Right.
much easier than the days when we had to handwrite letters and put a stamp and address it, and
Yeah.
much easier now. Barbie, what impact do you see in the world from what you have done? From either people who have been on your trips, people you've influenced, people you have in your life? Where do you see the ripples from your work?
Well, the fact that we have a peace center and all of the things that are going on there and reaching out from there, it's really very, very important. Everybody can add to that. People can't necessarily start something, but they can add to something that other people have started, and that's very important.
Yes. Yes. Well, you were one of the starters of things.
Sometimes. But I join what other people start also. That's important. It's about life showing up.
Showing up. I can't see anybody else's hand, so if anybody has a comment or question of Barbie.
Well, I know I should just have my mouth shut by now, but you know, I know my mother. Mom, there are what I know was a powerful, what has been powerful for many people are the different events you would organize to get more background and context about parts of the world. So there could be some more understanding in terms of what to support and what not to support. So at the Peace Center, for example, you would sponsor somebody who'd just written a book. And I remember going to one of those events, and it was about Palestine and Israel. And I came away just with so much more understanding, having heard this author who just written a comprehensive tome about the situation there, and visibly showing a map before and after, the original Israeli settlements it was a color-coded map. And so where those settlements were green, there were just 3 or 4 little green spots. And then 30 years later, the inverse, almost solid green with just a few white spots. And so when we're looking at what's happening right now, I think that helped me, and I know, many others who were present that day, just reflect and ask, how is it that these situations come to be? And not just taking it on face value, what has happened in that moment. What led to this? And what could be our role in leading to this? And what can be our role in moving into something more evolved? So you gave, I'm just thinking of that one example, but it's sort of closest to the surface right now, but you sponsored many speakers to speak about parts of the world we just don't get a lot of press about. North Korea, Southeast Asia, different parts of South America, and so on. And so in that way, you're also broadening the world and connecting people so that there's more knowledge moving forward in our own decision making about what's happening.
And after you returned from each trip, you arranged a public meeting of the participants of the trip so that they could share with others who weren't able to go on the trips what they learned, what they wanted more of, how they were empowered to work to get more justice in some of the places that they'd been to and seen. And that was important because that just extended the ripples in your pond.
So I'm getting the sense, Barbie, that you not only opened minds, but you opened hearts with your trips.
And I was trying to open doors.
And what did you hope would come through those doors?
More people with more understanding and caring.
More understanding and caring.
Opening eyes, and that helped open hearts.
Opening eyes helps open hearts.
So many people have not a clue about what's happening in other countries. And the U.S. participation in some of that.
So seeing so that we can understand. And it sounds like there was always a flavor of justice.
Oh, always, always. Peace and justice. That's been the goal all the time. That's what we were looking for. That's what we were trying to help emerge. Always. Peace and justice.
So as you look around today, how's it going?
Not as well as I would hope.
What would you tell a younger person today? And I'm younger. Okay? We're all younger, except your sister. She's the same age. What would you tell us?
Read, travel, speak to people in other countries, find out what their goals are, what they're working for. Ask them how we can help instead of knowing what we should do.
Sounds like a lesson in listening.
Indeed. Indeed.
So we've all been listening. How about any comments? Anyone? And I see Shirley has her hand. Yes, Shirley?
Hi, Shirley.
Hi, how are you? I have to admit that you have made a profound difference in my daughter's life. I mean, since she's gone on several trips with you, and I personally have always resented the fact that we spent the money, but she got the benefit. But in the long run, that was how it should have been. So I had my chance to travel, and I don't have the same open attitude that she does, but I think her travels with you, with our developing world's curriculum and value system has changed her profoundly. And I think that's how she ended up being an immigration lawyer. And I think she has a compassion and a depth for other peoples that I could never approach. So, I thank you for that. And interestingly enough, she married a fellow who is a part of, I think he's one of the founders of a nonprofit that right now, for some reason, the name escaped me, but
Global Exchange? Is it Global Exchange?
Yes, Global Exchange, big organization. But I've noticed that they've taken some of your ideas and like your trips, and their model is very similar to what you've been doing decades before they started. And theirs are called reality tours. And my husband went on one of them to Cuba, and my son-in-law was there, and so was my grandson. So there were 3 of them on a trip that only had 5 people. But I've noticed my husband has been profoundly changed also by that kind of trip. It's not your typical tourist visit to a nice place where, you know, you see the sights and then you take pictures and you go home. So I think that what you have brought to our world, our developing world, and the people have been profound. Your contribution, you and Vic, are wonderful examples for. I'm so glad that my daughter uses you as her model and not her mother.
Thank you so much. I love your daughter. She is just wonderful. And I really appreciated having other members of your family on a tour. I just feel, aside from all that they learned and that they've done because of what they learned, they gave me a great deal of pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to add this because, Mom, global exchange is actually, my understanding, built on your model.
I think it is.
And yeah, and they continue to consult with Mom, and they most recently asked you, could they call their tours reality tours, because that really was our developing world term. So it's my understanding that this is a model that's based on our developing world. And
I think
yeah.
they adopted a lot of the model that your parents brought that were really revolutionary as far as the thinking about what travel should be like. Most people think you go to, as you said, go to a nice hotel and, you know, see the usual tourist attractions, but our developing world really developed a different model that really opened people's eyes and their hearts too.
Well, I hope so. That's certainly the goal.
I think it worked, and it should be spread.
Thank you.
So Barbie, this model wasn't out there before you and Vic did it. Is that right? No, was anybody else?
We didn't know of anybody else.
So how did you figure this out? What was the learning process like as you started to do this?
Well, it was our own travel and what we learned from the questions we asked and the answers that we got. So we just put that into practice.
So it was expanding on your own travel at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then just...
Yeah. Realizing that if more people had these experiences, we'd have a better world.
Well, and here I am again interjecting, because you did have a profound experience going to Danish folk high school and traveling in Europe on your own right after college.
That's true.
And the folk high schools in Denmark are all about inclusivity and broadening world perspective. And you were part of that Scandinavian seminar, which was inviting people from North America to come to Scandinavia and learn different ways of
reminding me of that. That's very important. I mean, it was very important for our own development and how we carried it on and spread it. Thank you.
It's wonderful to have memory prompts, isn't it?
In
We-
one of the recordings that I listened to, making the clip that I made, Vic talked about his students' work in Nicaragua, and I think Nicaragua or Honduras, that you all went down and saw what his student had been doing. And that was also one of the early prompts to share what people like the student were doing. And I thought that was really interesting. I love how your work
People are doing wonderful things all over the world. So by traveling the way we do, we learn about this and we can replicate some of it. You don't have to invent it yourself.
You've already done that for us.
No, I don't think so, but
Any other comments? We're getting ready to sort of wrap up here. So any comments or appreciation, Shirley?
I just remember that my daughter took us, her family of 2 children, her husband, and my husband and I, the grandparents, on what she called a civil rights tour, which she created herself. And it was it was in December. And we went to a plantation in the Deep South, near New Orleans, that was focused on the slaves, not on the owners of the plantation. So most of the civil rights tour was about civil rights and justice and the history of the people in the Deep South. So I would say that she was modeling your reality tours, but on, like going backwards, what Karen experienced as a child. I was getting that kind of reverse tour through my daughter, because she just has a different attitude toward visiting different places that I never expected to experience. But it was a very good tour. I think it was 10 days in the Deep South.
I take that as a huge compliment. And say to her, carry on.
Carry on and show up. Any other comments as we wrap up here? The WILPF San Jose regular 3rd Friday meeting. Here we are in October 2023. Barbie, do you tell your age?
Sure, I'm 93.
And still showing up?
That's what life is about.
And carrying on?
Show up and carry on.
Yeah. Yeah. So this has been a pleasure for me to have the privilege of sitting here with you.
Oh, come on
now. And all of the friends and family that are here to really hear some of the story and the inspiration to show up and carry on, even in tough times.
Especially in tough times.
These are tough times. We needed your inspiration tonight, Barbie.
It gives me inspiration to be talking with you and listening to you. So thank you.
So we carry on and show up. Speaking of which, do we have any announcements about when to show up? Any way we can carry on? Has anybody got something they're doing that show up and carry on? Well, I can just tell you that the Raging Grannies show up for what we call a rehearsal. The first Friday at 3:00 in the afternoon, and it doesn't involve at this point any travel. You can just click on the Zoom link. We have our regular 3rd Friday meeting we used to meet at the Peace Center, but that's not what's happening now. We meet on the Peace Center called Zoom. And the next meeting is November 17th, which is the third Friday. And I just want to invite people to offer someone this space to talk about peace and justice issues. And sometimes we need to invite people just to get their story, like we've had tonight. We've had your story, because these things need to be archived so that we don't lose the history of those foremothers and forefathers who have really blazed the trail for us. And we have some of those right here in WILPF. We've got some really very active people in the WILPF in the Bay Area. And I just want to express my appreciation. I've heard stories tonight that I have never heard before. So from members in the who are here, it's like, well, I didn't know that. So this is quite wonderful. Joan, you've unmuted yourself. Does that mean you'd like to speak?
I just wanted to be sure that people are getting enough information about the things that are happening in Israel and Palestine primarily, and opportunities to participate in contacting Congress, in speaking up and going out and being public. There have been some really good large demonstrations in Washington, D.C. and in lots of places around the country. And so if anybody is not getting enough of that information already, please put your email address in the chat and I will copy the chat.
So Joan, maybe if you put your email address in the chat, they could reach out to you as well.
Okay, so I can do that. Yes. Okay.
I wanted to say briefly that when I did oral histories that are now collected at Stanford umpteen years ago, we have a variety of interviews with WILPF members in San Jose. And we're having our branch meeting tomorrow, and I didn't have time to send a list of all the folks that were interviewed for that project. It was the Women's Peace Oral History Project. It's at Stanford University Archive of Recorded Sound. And my bedroom right now is filled with boxes of copies of transcripts. And the archives has digitized the recordings, so you can just go onto the website, and I will send that, I guess, to Joan. I'll send you sort of that contact where you all could look back on some earlier oral histories of San Jose members. We did overall 95 women, mostly, almost exclusively WILPF members, but they were also members of another Mother for Peace and other peace organizations. And we had students. I had a class at San Jose State where they did interviews, and students at Stanford, and individuals from WILPF branches. So it's a pretty compact collection. Our first meeting of our branch was in 1922. And there's sort of an insect-eaten and partially disintegrating leather notebook with the minutes. And I know that I really treasure the interviews you guys have been doing to keep that spoken word. And when you do a video, to see the person. Researchers like to just look at the notes, the transcripts. But you can also, as you are doing, look at the person. I still hear the voices of people I interviewed 20 years ago. In my head, Doris Jones, Margaret Stein. Anyway, so thank you for what you're doing as a branch to carry that work forward.
Thank you for that acknowledgement, Judy. We have still some work to do.
You're doing a great job. And I hope we also start to interview young women. We have nobody under 60 in our branch. You know, and we vigil every Friday outside Galvez that goes to Stanford. And we have not made the kind of connection that you have with a peace center, permanent building near a university. And that was a wonderful development. Thanks.
That's part of your legacy. The peace, the peace building near a university. Very nicely said, Judy. Very nicely said. Well, I think we're coming towards the end of this meeting, and I just want to acknowledge Barby. Thank you, Barby, for coming, for sharing your story. People are waving and saying thank you, and to everybody who was the support team on this. So we have the support team that was the tech maven, and that would be Rowan. Without Rowan, this would not have been at nearly what it was. The audio clip and the photos were just wonderful. And to Karen, who gave us so much help and information. To Karen, thank you so much. And not only that, but you participated tonight to give us some wonderful prompts so Barby could tell other stories. So thank you very much. That made it very much more interesting and in-depth and had a lot more breadth as well. And any other comments? Anyone else? I'm happy to see Joan, who is the twin of Barbie. It's nice to see you. Thank you for coming. And everyone else who is here. So it's time to close our meeting if we have nobody else. And we have a tradition. Let me see if I can get the songs up. Yes, okay. We have a tradition of singing 2 songs at the beginning and 2 songs at the end. Rowan, are you going to do the one song and I'll do the other? Rowan and I haven't arranged this.
Yes, I will do the one song if you want me to.
Great. And then Barbie and I will sing the final song. It is the traditional bookend closing of our meeting. So let me share the songs, and everybody knows you mute yourself. You mute yourself. I got to get up here and mute myself. And now it's rolling.
When we see a problem, we show up. When we see injustice, we show up. When we see someone in pain, we show up with friends and train. When we see injustice, we show up. When we see a neighbor needing help, then it's time to show up for them too. We're all interconnected and your pain hurts me too. When we see injustice, we show up. When it's time to head out to the march, the grannies will always be there too. With our hats and protest songs, you can count that we belong. When we see injustice, we show up.
And we should note that Rowan wrote the words to that. Thank you, Rowan. It's wonderful. Here is how we close our meetings. Okay, Barbie, it's you and I. Oh, when everyone has equal rights, when everyone has equal rights, how I want to be in that number. When everyone has equal rights, when we build schools instead of bombs, when we build schools instead of bombs, how I want to be in that number. When we build schools instead of bombs, when we replace the racist system, when we replace the racist system, how I want to be in the number. When we replace the racist system, when we have overcome the climate crisis, when we have overcome the climate crisis, how I want to be in the number. When we have overcome the climate crisis, when we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in the number. When we make peace instead of war. Right. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight and participating in this program and being part of what's happening here and collecting our stories and honoring Barbie as well.